and Schneider Electric's Green Yodha presents the Sustainability Roadmap towards a Greener Economy. I'm Swati Shahi. This exclusive event today at the capital city, Delhi, brings together industry experts, regulators, and thought leaders from across sectors to discuss the way forward and fast-track India's drive towards sustainability. Through the evening, the event will delve into how industries and businesses can thrive in the fourth industrial revolution in a more energy-efficient and climate-positive way, minimizing carbon footprints and being mindful about sustainable, eco-friendly practices. Let me bring in some facts to explain the current situation. As per a research published in the journal Scientific Data, India ranked 5th among the top 10 contributors to global warming. We were also the third largest producer of carbon dioxide by volume in 2022. Well, the crisis is real. Now, India has promised the world that it would go net zero by the year 2070. Therefore, it has become even more crucial for India Inc. to be at the forefront of the sustainability drive. Now, India Inc. is not only an indispensable partner in achieving sustainable growth, but also the primary engine to get there, both through behavior change and with resources. It is central to driving ambitious national climate targets. Businesses around the world are now recognizing that the move towards sustainability presents significant benefits in terms of cost savings and efficiency. Furthermore, it helps attract investors and new clients as the entire ecosystem agrees on the need for immediate action towards creating a sustainable future. So today, at this very special event, we will draw sharp focus on how businesses can contribute and bring us closer to get net zero in the most efficient and effective manner. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite Parikshit Luthra, Chief of Bureau, CNBC TV18, on stage to give the opening address. Let's welcome him with a huge round of applause.
Thank you very much, Swati, and welcome to this very special event. CNBC TV18 and Schneider Electric bring to you the Green Yodha initiative, the sustainability roadmap towards a greener economy. At COP26, India's 2030 decarbonization target was announced. The Prime Minister had announced the Panch Amrit of 5 climate goals. India now stands committed to reduce emissions intensity of its GDP by 45%. 50% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy sources, and 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. Those are among our key commitments. As we look forward to COP28 this year, India has put the focus on just energy transition and increased climate finance at the G20 as well. Launched last year, India's Life or Lifestyle for Environment mission is a key talking point in G20 meetings. To drive India's renewable energy roadmap, India has launched the 20,000 crore green hydrogen mission. You have a 10,000 crore FAME subsidy scheme for electric vehicles, a 26,000 crore PLI scheme for advanced automotive components, and a PLI for advanced chemistry cells with an 18,000 crore outlay. A lot of statistics there. Indian government and regulators are also working on rules to ensure companies reduce carbon emissions across functions. SEBI recently has put in place a regulatory framework for value chain ESG disclosures for listed entities. Introduction of the carbon credit trading scheme through the Energy Conservation Amendment Bill 2022 is an important step towards creating a carbon trading framework in India. The carbon credit trading scheme incentivizes companies to embrace clean energy technology and transition to low-carbon processes. The government is also working towards a green credit program. All of this in line with what's happening globally as well. The recently introduced carbon border adjustment mechanism is very important for Indian businesses because all companies exporting goods to Europe, they will have to face penalties or a tax for carbon embedded in their products. Therefore, tightening of environmental regulations around the world makes it imperative for all industries, big and small, to work on a war footing to reduce emissions across their businesses. And it's not just the penalty impact we must think of. Look at the record high temperatures and heat waves every year. Rainfall, landslides, heavy flooding that has led to thousands of crores of losses just a few weeks ago. Just look at the economic and humanitarian loss. Climate changes lead to loss of lives, loss of property, damage to manufacturing units, disruption of supply chains, and ability to spend as well. Therefore, it's extremely important for government and industry to work together for a sustainability roadmap. I can assure you that we couldn't have had a better panel to discuss this topic, and we thank Schneider Electric for partnering with us. Now, on popular demand, the difference between carbon neutrality and net zero. Carbon neutrality means that you can compensate for your emissions, typically with offsets, while net zero requires abatement of your emissions. Now, I was told that this is a term that will come up very frequently in the conversations, and we must explain this to our audience, even though I think all of you are experts here. You don't need any advice and no explaining. With that, I hand it back to Swati.
Thank you, Parikshit, for sharing your insights and setting the context of the evening. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for me to invite on stage Deepak Sharma, Zone President, Greater India, MD and CEO, Schneider Electric India, to address the gathering. Let's welcome him with a huge round of applause.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to stand here and talk about something which is very common to all of us. And it's actually it's an important time. I mean, we will be celebrating our 77th Independence Day in few days. I had the privilege to witness exactly the same moment 2 days back in Paris during the 14 Juillet, Bastille Day, where Honorable Prime Minister was the chief guest, and we had some conversations within the two sides of the CEOs about the same topic. But the most privilege was when you saw the Indian defense marching on Champs-Élysées on Sare Jahan Se Acha. So, you know, that shows that the moment of India has come where we are actually on a very important part on the global roadmap or the global focus, where India is going to ride the next phase of the growth economy and digitization. So it's a very great moment for all of us to witness that we are in a country at the right time or in the right phase when we play an important role across the world. Now, we would be a 5 trillion economy by 27-28, probably a more 6 trillion economy by 2030. That would mean we would need much more urbanization. The data shows that almost 60 crore, 600 million people of us would be in urban cities. Our needs of data center, I say corrected, probably is going to more 3x than 2x. Amount of industrialization we will do. We would be adding almost 500 billion plus businesses across the globe. Most of our global cities will be growing faster than the global bigger cities, and our infrastructure spend would be adding another by 3 to 5x. This is all exciting to the journey we want to build in this country. Not in country for country, but the country for the world. And this would further get accelerated into the period of Amrit Kal, where India celebrates its 100 years into 2047. So again, when you are in the country, you're in any business, any regulator, any operations, you only feel excited that there are going to be huge opportunities, great potential to come up in the years to come. This would mean that the country would need almost 6 times energy consumption and generation for the years to come. This would also mean that 75%, as per the basics defined today, we would be coming from green sources, and 25% of will be also generated locally through local generation sources. All this sounds very good, but what we forget is this. This is a global data that shows that while we are very excited about all these growths and all these numbers which excite us from a business perspective, all from our consumption perspectives, all our lifestyle perspectives, the world is actually going a very, very south direction. This data, which was as old as 2022, shows that the greenhouse emissions in the world are at the range of around 60 gigatons. And just from carbon emissions, 75% of these greenhouse emissions are coming from carbon emissions. And if you discount what is natural carbon generation, the remaining 80% is generated through us. When I say us, is this room, is this planet, and the people who are living on this planet. So if we continue that pace, there would be no planet. And that's probably the reason we are all here together to figure out what do we do in our time, in which I say our time is now, it's today, so that the generations coming next and the coming generations will have a planet which is livable. Some of us, I live in the same city closer to the NCR region. There are months, there are weeks when the air really becomes unbreathable. This is now. What would happen in 15 years, 10 years, 20 years? This is easily visible the day you see that smoked or a choked day and your throats are already tough or soaring because of the level of the pollution. So this is what we see already happening to the world. And when you just cut it further, that what is the source of the problem, it's on the both sides. The problem of the pure carbon emission, the full picture cut by 75, 80% of 75, the 36 gigatons of carbon emissions, all this is divided on the two sides of our needs, on the supply side and on the consumption side. And I think the responsibility this generation carries is how do we fix the both? It's not either or. It's our responsibility to figure out what do we do right to ensure that we consume consciously, we build an infrastructure where the consumption is more sustainable, and of course it can be fixed, but when you fix it correctly on the consumption side, it ought to also fix on the demand side. So here you will see a data, this is what is globally visible. If you take just pure India, India is still not that level of urbanized. We still don't have those bigger cities. We don't have enough buildings. We're going to go build even more. That means our trends would exactly be the same if we don't do something different. Even today, our industry, our buildings, our transport contribute the basic and the biggest contribution of our CO2 emissions. So the whole call for the humanity is how do we ensure that we build something tomorrow which is going to help us to fix this. And guess what? The good thing is today technologies are available to make that transition possible. The transition can happen, and it's on us. If we use that possibilities to make those changes, it's going to help us to reverse those trends and do it right way for our generations to come. The beauty for us is that some of the Western world did everything and realized it's a bit late or they did it wrong and they had to correct it. For us, we are building it. So as we go from a 3.5 trillion economy to 5 and 6 in the next 5-7 years, and then the Amrit Kal phase, we still have to build a lot. And while we build this, we can build it correctly. And what we build correctly is also sourced by the demand. How do I consume it? How do I use it? And if you do some sort of basic data, a big part of the saving can actually come from what do we use. So the solutions are available that by just merely digitization, we can save 25% of our consumptions. We can even find even more stronger savings if you electrify the processes. So a good combination of digitizing and electrification on the consumption side can help us to achieve a good 50+% saving. If I do another one, which is on the on the generation, and the consumption will drive the generation, is the negative feed. Because if I consume right, I would be bound to generate right. And here we can find more savings coming from the generation perspective, be it all the possible energy sources. So a combination of two is going to help us to at least find that solution, which shows probably 70% of the 36 gigatons of carbon emissions we are emitting. We can control it, and that can help us. So these technologies do exist. Now the challenge comes, how do we deploy it? And if you look at a beautiful city, beautiful town, a hamlet, or a smaller rural village in the country, actually, we have to be honest, the biggest pollution creator is the top 20%. I mean, depends on geographies, but the 1% and then the next 30% is where the biggest pollution is created. The people and the ones who are living in the simplest style are not the biggest contributor to this CO2 mess we are creating around the world. So all these big cities, be it integrated architecture or an isolated architecture, if they all come together into a technology network or a technology cycle where each one of the component of the technology plays an important role, be it in generation or distributed energy from the creation perspective, and then it helps us to, as a consumer, the way we consume in a fashion that it helps us to ensure that economy of saving or creation. This is where the equation lies, and that's where in electric world, because electric is the most cleanest form of the energy, the most vector of decarbonization, and with a digital asset, we can actually create a more sustainable world. So the whole story today is not about how deep is the problem. The whole discussion we should be talking about and should be leaving behind is how do we clean it and build it in a way that this is going to be more sustainable for tomorrow through electrification and digitization. We at the Schneider Electric are super proud that some of our big installations are in this country are powered by Schneider technologies, be it the metros, the airports, the hospitals, the buildings, the green buildings. All the revolutions or the green stories we're talking about are actually helping us to build a greener infrastructure. And with all this, we are very proud that with all the government supports, and we are a strong partner in building tomorrow, which is going to be green in all the thoughts or the different initiatives the government is taking to build a sustainable tomorrow. So again, thank you for coming. I'm looking forward for more conversations together and a deeper interaction that how do we involve each other, participation, to build tomorrow, which is going to be more greener, more sustainable, through technologies available, so that we leave a planet behind us, which is going to be usable for our generations to come. Thank you for coming again, and looking forward to some good discussions in the coming hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak, for sharing those insights with us and for an enlightening session, and also on how we can build a sustainable and a greener tomorrow. Moving on to a very special conversation on the sustainability roadmap towards a greener economy. With India's meteoric rise as one of the leading economies of the world, its energy consumption has also increased drastically, causing an environmental degradation and stressing natural resources. Therefore, the country needs a roadmap that helps achieve economic development while also safeguarding the environment and natural resources for future generations. Through this conversation, we aim to highlight the innovative approaches of corporates and organizations to make sustainability an integral part of their functions and operations. The conversation will also shed light on how they are leveraging technologies to achieve sustainability goals and how they can strike a balance between economic growth and environmental conservation. So without further ado, I would like to invite Parikshit once again on stage to take the conversation forward, and our esteemed panelists to join us on stage. Deepak Sharma once again, Zone President, Greater India, MD and CEO, Schneider Electric India. We'd welcome you on stage, please. Everyone, please, with a huge round of applause, let's welcome all our panelists. Sunil Gupta, Co-founder, MD and CEO, Yodha Data Services. G. Ashok Kumar, Director General, National Mission for Clean Ganga. Anshuman Magazine, Chairman and CEO, India, Southeast Asia, Middle East Asia, CBRE. Vijay Jaipuriar, CEO, Delhi International Airport Limited, a subsidiary of GMR Airports Infrastructure Limited. Sriram Khattar, MD, DLF Rental Business. Let's welcome them with a huge round of applause once again. Parikshit, over to you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. It must have been a very, very long day for all of you at work. It's a Friday evening. Thank you very much to all our panelists Ms. Vibha, and everyone in the audience for joining us today. It really is a very important occasion and topic as well, our energy transition. We're seeing businesses across the world working towards sustainability, working towards ESG norms, greater compliances across businesses, and cutting emissions. And we've had a number of these conversations over the last 7 to 8 months, and especially in the run-up to COP28, there'll be more such conversations. But clearly, this is no longer a goal or a greater good that we need to work for. It makes all the business sense. And as a news anchor, over the last few weeks, we've seen so many climate disasters, and it makes you really think that we need to all think about it. And one thing that I'll ask all the panelists is what we need to do as citizens as well. There's a lot that we can do as industry, we can do as government, but as citizens also, we need to change our own mindsets. So I'm not the one who should be doing too much talking. I'm going to kick this panel discussion off. Let me bring in Mr. Deepak Sharma at this stage. Deepak, that was a great presentation by you, giving us a sense of what Schneider Electric is doing with its partners across the world. I'd like you to give us a sense and explain our audience. You've got some major, big players, multinationals, who know what they want to do, what they need to do when it comes to sustainability. But a company which is starting off, how do they make sure that they move towards a journey of greater compliances, reducing carbon emissions, but at the same time ensure progress?
So thank you again. Probably it's one of the most important points. How do we start? Where do we start? And we normally talk about, defining a strategy. What's our next 5-year strategy? Next, what is our next 10-year strategy? And then in the strategy, we say, what is the sustainability piece of it, right? I think that era is over. There is nothing called strategy and sustainability. There is only one strategy, which is sustainable strategy. Because imagine that you won't have a planet, so all the strategies you're going to define, they are of no use because you don't know how to and where to implement them. So sustainability comes, I think, as a core part of our stories, whatever we do. And then comes, okay, we have defined a strategy which is sustainable. This is what we achieve. And the beauty is no more a vanity metric. It actually becomes like a sanity metric, right? How do we ensure it happens? Now, when you look at this, I think it comes across the whole value chain of the company. You start and define it at the highest level in the corporate, but it has to go to the last man in the company or the first man in the company, so that it's not a plan of action. You do something parallel to other things. It has to be embedded in the core of what you do. As we say, the best technologies are that they get penetrated to the extent that they become part of you. They are invisible because they are inside you. The sustainability story in a company, in a corporate, should be in a very similar fashion. It needs to get embedded to the extent of the whole system that it's no more a program. It is invisible because that's the only way you operate. So again, it goes from the top to the bottom. It should be incorporated into the whole life cycle. At Schneider Electric, so we have our own sustainability school. And our objective is to train all our 38,000 people across it. And it's been on now for 18 months. We have already trained a couple of thousands. And it's not about selling a technology. It's not about selling a technology to A company or a B company. It's all about how do we live those values in our own kitchen. So for example, our own smart factories. How do we process? How do we manufacture? How do we make our supply chains fleet green? So it covers across the whole spectrum of our operations. And then it's not possible alone. So then if it's a small or a big size society company, it's very important to figure out how do you collaborate with a larger ecosystem, right? We have examples developed in the country, for example, with Capgemini. They have around 29 campuses in the country. It took us a long time to develop it, but today all the campuses of Capgemini are powered by Schneider Electric technologies, and we have achieved 29% savings in their carbon emissions. Now, this is not just Capgemini because it's big, but it's equally possible for small. And here we believe a partner ecosystem is the only way. You cannot do it alone, and the technologies will help us to find an ecosystem that which all of us come together and find a solution. So starts from the top, it needs to go flow through the bottom, and the first man in the company, last man in the company. It has to become a ritual. It's not like nice to have strategy. It is the strategy. And then you find an ecosystem where you can collaborate with an extended group of like-minded people like Green Yodha, right? You come across together and then solve the solution. So that would be the way to look forward.
And I guess that is something we should all aim to be, Green Yodha. Everyone should be a Green Yodha.
Everyone should.
Only by a few buildings in the world which are data centers. That scenario is now happening in India as well. It happened in Singapore because that is the country which had got a big part of the data center of the whole APAC. The energy consumption and the resultant heat generation and the pollution increased so much that they had to put a moratorium on the data center construction in 2019, which they took out just now. And even now they are saying a bubbling industry which data center was there, that now they can build only very small, and that also 100% powered by a green power only. So, and again, just to give you an idea that one data center building can consume a power which is equivalent to almost 30 to 40 commercial residential buildings. So it's a serious problems which need to be handled. Good part in India, whether it is Yodha or anybody, is that we started late. While the mature markets now have got aging data centers, it's very difficult to undo something which is already done and only they can do for new data centers. In India, this industry started growing just in the last 7 or 8 years. We already has, as an industry, become 4 times bigger and possibly will become another 4 times bigger in the next 7 to 8 years. So in a way, as a late entrant, we have an advantage that we can adopt latest technologies, and we are aware about that. 2 things which need to be done in data centers: the type of power you are consuming and the amount of power you are consuming. In terms of type of power, instead of coal-based power which is available from the grid, can I actually have an open access contracts with green power producer, be it solar or wind or gas-based, and have a direct contract with them. Good part is that those frameworks from a regulation points of view are available in India. Today, even if I want to power on my data centers 100% green power, I can do that. Of course, nothing on the rooftop can sustain the demand of a data center because the amount is so big that you need to have 300 acres of land somewhere remotely, which is generating power to you, upload in the grid, and then draw it from your data centers. So that is something which we are doing. That is what industry is doing, that either building our own dedicated captive solar power plant or a wind power plants, or taking it on a contract basis from the green power producers and powering your data center 100% on green power. That is one thing which the industry is doing. Second part is the amount of power you're using. 2 parts there. One is that the power which is going into the actual equipment. Data center is all about hardware equipment. A big part is controlled by the equipment manufacturer itself, the Intels and the AMDs of the world, because they have to make the efficient chips. They have to make the chips which possibly can be nowadays, we are saying, water can go up to the chip, or can the chips be immersed into water so that they don't generate heat. That is one part. So a big part of that we generate less heat and accordingly generate less power, consume less power is in the hands of the equipment manufacturers. But the bigger part which data centers can do is, can I consume lesser power in cooling the data center? And that is where our term, what we call as the power usage efficiency. For every 1 unit of power which I use for my hardware equipment, how much extra power I'm using to cool that equipment. So there are technologies, and I think Schneider is at the forefront of providing many of those technologies. Can I use efficient chillers? Can I operate my data centers at a higher temperature, let's say 25 degrees C, instead of operating at 20 or 22 degrees C? Can I do containment so that there's no mixing of hot air and cold air? As I said, can I take liquid up to the chip level in the server instead of only cooling it by air, and liquid is only happening at the chiller level? So there are many, I would say, technology interventions, which I think Deepak was also talking about, which Yodha has done, which I would say majority of the players in India are doing to reduce the amount of power we are consuming and the type of power we are consuming, making it more and more green.
All right, we'll come back to you again in a short while from now to know more about what Yodha is doing in terms of reducing emissions. But Anshuman, if I were to come to you, and I'll put this question to Mr. Khattar as well. Anshuman, beginning with you, when it comes to buildings and construction, what are some of the steps that lead to the highest amount of emissions?
First of all, I just want to mention what Deepak said. We are number 5 globally as a country, contributing to whatever global warming or climate change. This is when what we expect so much development and urbanization. So we're expecting 150 to 200 million square feet of office space to be built in next 3 years. 90 million square feet of warehousing would come in next 3 years. Millions of square feet of housing, retail, healthcare, and the entire urbanization where maybe more than 100 million people will shift from rural to urban areas. So for us to remain at number 5 itself will be an achievement. I'm sure we'll move up, unfortunately, that number which we should not. So huge amount of work has to be done. To your question, what is the contribution? I mean, obviously energy is the main contributor. And there was a stats you had put about 29%, I had a stat of 35%, is the contribution of buildings and construction in energy consumption and thing, which is, even if it is 30%, it's 1/3. So buildings and construction are major contributors and will play a major part. So to answer your question, your question is, what is the contribution, right?
What are the steps when it comes to construction of buildings? What are
Sure.
the steps that lead to the greatest amount of pollution?
Everything from, if you're constructing, there are materials, there's energy, there's water. Every step is a huge waste disposal, and whatever the construction residues are, what is happening. But of course, number one is, and like, he mentioned for a data center, it's not only electricity, it's also water. And all of that consumption, and the energy consumption is massive. We don't even imagine that in a normal office building or anything, the amount of electricity in air conditioning, in construction itself, when you're going through the whole construction process, the material management, it's massive, massive consumption, and it contributes to pollution.
Right. Mr. Khattar, coming to you, as Anshuman was pointing out, it's a complicated process. You've got an entire value chain. Now, when it comes to reducing emissions across your value chain, which are some of the low-hanging fruit and some of the difficult areas which are challenging for companies like yours to reduce emissions in the construction and building sector?
So I'll start with the challenges first. I think the biggest challenge is to be persevering and to be at it all the time. I think that's the biggest challenge. I think Deepak just mentioned that it's a strategy, but it has to percolate down to the bottom of the pyramid, and that's most important. In terms of what can be done to do, the biggest factor contributing to emissions is energy. And there is lots that can be done there. I think from a national point of view, moving to renewable energy is great, but I think we need tremendous levels of power reforms to be able to achieve what we are looking to do. It's energy on one side, it is water conservation on the other, it is waste management on the third. The other major contributor to it is transportation. And unless we move to either public transportation or electric movement transportation, we will continue to add to the emissions. Once these two are managed, at least from a point of view of the business that I am in, we are able to control more than 90% of the carbon emissions.
That's good to hear. And of course, some of the steps that you're talking about are being taken by the government in terms of electrifying transport. But there too, there are some challenges with regard to charging infrastructure and technology as well. But Mr. Jaipuriar, to get you in, you were telling us a short while back, and it's widely known that the Delhi airport is already carbon neutral. You're working towards going net zero by 2030. Give us a sense of how you have achieved your carbon neutral goals, and what are some of the next steps you would be taking in the next 5 to 10 years?
Thank you. So it's not only that we are we are looking for net zero, but in terms of all the green practices, I think we are leading across the world in terms of many of the practices. In fact, Delhi Airport is rated as one of the highest, has got one of the highest accreditation with Airport Council International at 4.0 transition, and we were the second airport in the world to actually get it. And how we have done it is that we have embedded it into our day-to-day work. So if I can describe it in short, I can say there are 8 pillars on which basically our initiatives are standing. So first of all, you have to improve upon the efficiency of energy uses. And for that, whether it is changing everything into, including the runway lights, into more energy efficient lights, to working with airlines to provide them with taxi bot, which basically reduces their auxiliary power unit, and many other initiatives that we have worked on. Next is about putting it into the building itself. So all the infrastructure that we have developed in the past as well as we are developing now, we have got pre-certified green building. Like Terminal 1, which is getting completed right now, is already pre-certified green building platinum. So with T3 also being green building platinum, and this, so we have already embedded it. And that this is something which we have done the economics. If you look at the cost of a green building, it's possibly 5 to 7% higher than a normal cost. But we have measured that our energy efficiency improves by 13 to 15%. And it pays for itself in 15 years' time. So no infrastructure you are building for less than 15 years. So it pays for itself. So it makes great economic sense. Next is moving to renewable energy. So in fact, Delhi Airport is one of the few airports across the world which has got 100% renewable energy. We have got close to 6% of energy which is solar energy, and 94% is hydroelectric energy. We have invested in hydroelectric power generation, and we have got a long-term PPA signed with them, and that is what is actually supplying us 100% green energy. Next, you have to work on operational efficiency, because while scope 1 and scope 2 you can reduce by actually doing all these activities, but you have to work with airlines to make sure that even a scope 3 emission you are trying to reduce. So for operational efficiency in an airport, the biggest thing is about turnaround of an aircraft. For turnaround of an aircraft, there are at least 15 different stakeholders who have to work together. And for all of them to work together, there has to be a collaborative mechanism. So there is a tool called Airport Collaborative Decision Making, where all the stakeholders involved are actually logged in, and they can actually work in tandem to make sure that the efficiency is improved.
Right. So those are important points there, Mr. Jaipuriar, and I think that's a great example. A lot of things to think about for people who are starting off their companies, and even established businesses can emulate a lot. But Mr. Ashok Kumar, I'd like to get in the government experience here. The reason why I came to you after listening to all other industry members is to just understand what is the Prime Minister's larger vision when it comes to clean energy and government industry roadmap for achieving our global COP commitments. And the Ganga Conservation Mission, a very challenging and mammoth task. Give us a sense of the kind of challenges you have to overcome on a daily basis and the kind of collaboration you're looking from the industry on that.
Thank you. Actually, I was listening to the other panelists, many of them speaking on the electricity, but I would say the elephant in the room is water. Because we are taking water for granted, and all other things will survive only if there is water for people to drink. So water is very important. That's exactly why our Prime Minister had been stressing on water and water management for the last 8 years. So again, I'll go back to that data center, panelists on data center. They actually are as a new sector, and it is India can leapfrog a lot of technology. But for us, it is an established practice because maximum water in India is used for agriculture purpose. And there's a traditional way of giving irrigation, flood irrigation, and inefficient use of water. And that practice has to be changed. So see here, the challenge in water in India sector is we have to actually overturn very many years of legacy practices, as well as make people understand the value of water. That's one of the major challenges. Now, that exactly is what the Honorable Prime Minister started when in 2014 he started with the Swachh Bharat mission, because water security has two important aspects, the quantity aspect as well as the quality aspect. Now, water quantity, see, the rain comes every year, the rain comes, and then that it has been constant for over the years. Last 100 years, rainfall pattern is same. The intensity of rainfall is varied, but the quantity of rain which comes in every day, every year is the same. So, this good quantity of water which comes in can be spoiled by dirty water coming in. So, liters of good water can be spoiled by a few liters of dirty water. So that's why when we started the Swachh Bharat mission, it was actually to ensure that the toilets are provided to the people so that the open defecation is avoided, and that really prevented a lot of contamination coming into the drinking water sources. That's one major important. Second, realizing the importance of water, he came out with the Ministry of Jal Shakti to combine all the various ministries handling water together. So these are two major interventions. Now coming to the river Ganga. River Ganga is one of the most important rivers, not only of the world, but not only of the country, but of the world also. And there are many people who have a lot of astha with the river. So that's again another problem which we face, because there are a lot of established practices, beliefs associated with the river Ganga, and make that behavioral change in that is very important. Another point which we had a biggest problem in Ganga was the release of effluents by the municipalities, towns on the banks of rivers, and also the industries. They used to release the untreated water from the industries as well as from the sewage sector without any impunity to these rivers, and that was what's polluting the river. And being 2,500 kilometers long river, it is very difficult to start one point and we'll say that we'll clear this up and then take the next point. So we have to work out the entire sector. So the biggest challenge was getting the people understand that pollution, you have to be a part of the solution. And second, bringing in the capacity or improving the capacities of the officials and the parastatals which are on the banks on the rivers to see that the sewage which is generated in the cities are not directly released to the river, only released after proper treatment. And the biggest challenge was again from the industrialists, because industrialists always took water for granted. And they said that if I use the water and then I will release it to the river without treatment. So this changing the mindset of the people and making them feel responsible to ensure that the water is not polluted by them was one big challenge which we had overcome in a large way. And let me also inform you that in the last COP15 meeting at Montreal, Namami Gange project was recognized as one of the top 10 world restoration flagships. It's a big honor for us, because the more than 200 projects which the UN assessed for halting the environmental degradation, reversing the environmental degradation, and with people's participation. These are the three major criteria for that. We have scored very high points in that, and that's why we were considered as one of the top 10. So this turnaround which happened happened in the last 8 years had been phenomenal, and we are hoping that it should be sustainable with people's participation, and slowly we are trying to bring in governance aspects, because water governance is very important, pricing of water, all these things. So as I said, the 1 point challenge the biggest challenge we face is the people's attitude towards water. Now, we should start respecting water, then probably a lot of solutions can be sorted.
Very important. We need to save our water, and everyone has to make sure that we work towards that goal as well. Deepak, coming to you, and I'd like to ask you about the use of digitization, Internet of Things, when it comes to operational efficiency, and at the same time, energy efficiency and using sustainable means of manufacturing. How can companies achieve that?
Yeah, so again, very interesting, but I want to compliment also Mr. Jaipuria, what he said, that, you know, when we look at these solutions, IT, OT, and I will come to the answer later, that probably on the first instance, we're not looking for an excuse, right? He said, I may be spending 5% more, 10% more, but then the bigger impact comes later when you process efficiency. So, you know, the mindset has to change, because we just can't change the behavior of saying, I cannot do it because it is expensive. I cannot do it because it's not comfort me. I cannot buy electric car because I don't have a charging station. Right? You need to overcome those thoughts. We have to. So again, thank you, Mr. Jaipuria, for reinforcing that. So coming back to the point of how the digitization helps. I mean, again, as I said, the technology do exist. And take any, for that matter, any installation, be a process plant. And first, sir, the water is as important as the air. We probably did little focus more on the air, but water is as good, and that's where the smart water projects do integrate into our sustainable and cities. So when we look at the need of the hour, if you talk about any infrastructure, be a process industry, be it a building industry, be it a transport industry, what do we have to ensure is what do we consume? Now, what you have to figure out is what you consume, is it measurable? And is it measurable, then how do you make it ensure that you are saving it, right? And this is basics. This you don't need. You drink milk at home, you drink air conditioning you run an air conditioner at home, you know how much you consume. And if you want to make savings, you know how much you want to save at what parameter in your daily life. That's exactly what we're talking about. So here we're talking about if I need to run a process a little bit better than I use today, so how do I do it, right? So here are technologies which will come, which can help us. And this good thing is, as I shared earlier, electricity in the existing form is the most cleanest vector for decarbonization. So this helps us to go that route. Now, when electricity gets topped up with intelligence, which is the IT and the OT will come together, there are the technologies here to do that work. And does that automation or the integration of an intelligence where the electricity behaves either in a decentralized atmosphere or in a centralized architecture to ensure that we get the best output of the usage. See, the purest efficiency or the purest energy is what you save, because you did not spend $1 to create it. See, if you spend $1 to create 2 units, and you save 1, that 1 actually came for free because you were earlier consuming it. So efficiency plays an important role as far as the journey to decarbonization is concerned. And then when you embed it on the top of it with the technologies of our digitization, which helps us to ensure a much better output. So we have real examples today in the industry where for a building to a process, we have saved energy efficiencies with the combination of both electrical and digital to a sustainability or to decarbonizing from 10% to 40%. So all these combinations will help us, will trigger us a solution to achieve those achievements for sustainability.
Right. You know, Deepak, one question that often comes up is that, yes, we're working towards our renewable energy goals, but when it comes to coal-based power, we cannot compromise on our industrial growth. Growth must come first, and we will take our time. We will work towards renewable energy, but at our own pace. We won't do what the West is wanting us to do. Sure. Mr. Khattar, how do we see that argument? Because all our panelists believe right now it is important to change the mindset. Let's see what's happening. We've seen terrible floods in Chennai some years ago. The entire city was flooded. What's happened in Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Mathura, very, very recently in Haryana in terms of heavy flooding. We're not immune from these situations. Climate change is very real. This crisis is staring us in the face every day. But when it comes to balancing our environmental needs with that of our progress, how do we strike a balance And how do we ensure growth?
So I go back to what I said earlier. It has to start from the top and it has to be persevering. I mean, to take from Mr. Ashok Kumar's thing, I'll explain what we did in the area of water conservation. Our journey started about 8 or 9 years ago. The first thing we did is to look at very, very efficient sewage treatment plants. The second was a very high level of rainwater harvesting. And then after that, building by building, floor by floor, we controlled the water intake, including educating people and the employees of tenants on the conservation of water at each stage. I mean, our teams went out and even started recycling the RO water which was getting discharged. And over these 8-9 years, now we have the US Green Business Council LEED Platinum Zero for water for 45 buildings, which is the highest number of buildings in the world. So I think it's not a question of just money, it's not a question of trying to do it overnight, it's a question of persevering, and it's a question of creating that mindset in the organization that these sustainability goals have to be met.
Right, Mr. Sunil Gupta was wanting to respond to you.
Yeah, and no, actually you raised this point of the balance between the needs of growth and sustainability. In case of a data center, I think it's not a need of a balance. It's actually both ways you are actually, benefited if you are green. I know I was speaking about 2 years during the, I think in between the first and second wave of COVID, there was a conference in US. And the data center operators across the world were there, and the whole debate was on the same topic, sustainability. How do you balance between the needs of growth? You need to have 24/7 uptime. You cannot, and you have to just keep on building data centers to meet the needs of digitization. So more and more power, more and more power. So if at that time you also need to consume green power, it means your cost of construction of data center will increase. So how do you do that? Or rather, cost of even running cost of power, green power, possibly will be increasing compared to a normal power. And I was possibly the only exception from India there who said that possibly I'm spending a little bit more in making my building green, but in India, with the rate of green power, even after all the overloadings on the top of that, the wheeling and all that thing, I net save about 15 to 20% compared to my normal sources of power. So even if I end up spending a little bit extra in making a green building, I am actually over a 5-year or a 10-year TCO, I end up saving also besides meeting the needs of my growth. So actually, in the case of data centers, with the amount of power we are consuming, we are no way compromising on our growth profile, which India need to grow by 4 or 5 times by adopting green. It is both ways we get benefited.
Right, something very similar to electric vehicles as well. The upfront cost may be much higher if you can get a entry-level car for 8 lakhs these days, and cars have become very expensive. An entry-level electric vehicle would be for about 13 lakhs or so. But at the end of the day, instead of 4,000 or 5,000 rupees on petrol or diesel per month, you would be spending about 500 to 600 rupees, which is a very good thing in the long run. But coming back to you, Mr. Sharma, and I'd like to ask you about companies which are very focused on cutting costs, having having very high profits, and manufacturing at the best possible or the lowest possible price. Now that is always a concern for every business. But the way things are changing globally, look at what's happening in Europe with the carbon border adjustment mechanism, in the United States and other nations with environmental regulations. Can our exports tomorrow be competitive if we don't work towards a safer, healthier environment and make sure we focus on that across businesses?
I don't know. I have to answer this. The answer would be no. You just can't survive in a world which is going to be more tougher to survive. So you have to actually, I would say different. You should be the first movers to get the easy access to those markets, right? Now, as I said earlier, if I'm working on pure export market, be it a product, be an architecture, or be be a car built in the country. There were a lot of debates about food built in India, manufactured in India for the European markets. So it has to be driven in a way that it qualifies and rates those standards. And we should not be waiting for them. I mean, we probably are much more ready to drive the change. As I said, we are building now. We don't have to correct it. So if I build it the right way, and it starts from the whole life cycle of the product. See, when you build a product, you're not seeing what I do in the factory, where the raw material got originated, how the raw material was processed, how the raw material moved to your factory, how did you process it, how did you store it, how did it move it. If I can prove the whole value chain and prove to the world that the others have not done it and we done it right, it automatically opens the door faster. And then when we talk about, Mr. Khattar was talking about the technologies, you know, when you build a smart green building, if you find a product, you know, it's like plug and play. I buy this instrument, I plug it into my building, and my building automatically gets additional 10 points of aggradation from a green perspective. You don't have to spend more. It's not about spending those few pennies at the installation. It's all about how faster you get the readiness to tomorrow. So for me, it's an opportunity, and I think we as a country can do it faster because the knowledge in a lot of other companies globally, the knowledge center is in the country. While we do a lot of processing around in the big world, but the knowledge is here. Okay. So we need to figure out those knowledges. Like for Schneider Electric, we have 6,000 our software experts in this country, which serves the country and the world. So I don't think we are behind anyone. We just need to fix those basics and build the full ecosystem and actually take a step to be the first movers into that industry.
Right. I'm going to take one final remark from Mr. Jaipuriar and then take very quick, rapid-fire closing remarks from all our panelists. But Mr. Jaipuriar, recently you launched the Eastern Cross Taxiway. Give us a sense of how's that experience been so far. We're also talking about having sustainable aviation fuel, SAF as well. How important is that for the Indian aviation industry?
Okay. In terms of having Eastern Cross Taxiway, actually it was to improve the efficiency of airport operation. As I was talking about earlier, that you need to improve the efficiency for the aircraft movement, work with the airlines to actually make it more sustainable. So with this taxiway, we are able to reduce the taxiing time by close to 9 minutes, which in terms of carbon, if I convert it into an annualized basis, is about 55,000 tons of carbon saving. Because every minute that the aircraft is taxiing less, that much of less of his auxiliary power unit is actually working. It has been a phenomenal experience. It is also a fantastic sight for people who are actually passing on the road below. And there are a lot of opportunities for them to take a photograph, but most important is that it's actually adding to our overall carbon neutrality. Next is sustainable aviation fuel. That is something which is the future. In fact, GMR Group has already signed with ADP and some of the other firms, and we are working on sustainable aviation fuel. There are some work that has already gone in, because in terms of what is the kind of biomass that will go into sustainable aviation fuel, we have a lot of cases of this crop burning. So in fact, it has come out in the study that that could be the biggest source of possibly producing SAF for future. And what we are seeing is that for that we will have to facilitate that from the airport point of view in terms of having possibly a storage and a distribution system. So that is why we have tied up with the aircraft producer, the likely SAF producer, as well as some of the scientists to work on this project.
All right. Thank you for those remarks. Now, quick closing remarks from all our panelists, starting with Anshuman. Anshuman, leave us with one thought that the construction industry, the real estate industry must do in the next 5 years when it comes to sustainability.
One thought is, one's too small, but very quickly, I think first change in mindset, creating awareness. I like this term I came through just recently, which says when you're building, be based on biomimicry, which is mimicking nature, biophilia, which is aligned to nature, principles. So if you build, optimize resources, be it energy, water, use minimal material, do assessments of be it GRISB or like Mr. Khattar mentioned, platinum rating, ESG assessments, use technology. But really, the main thing is to change the mindset. And the good part is why I'm optimistic is the occupiers, the corporates are demanding it. The younger people now are demanding that they need to do the right thing. So besides regulation, on the demand side is what will change this industry.
All right. Mr. Khattar, one thing that DLF would like to do on sustainability, on the environment in the next 5 years.
So I think we will, in the next 5 years, move towards 90% plus renewable energy usage and carbon neutrality over this period.
Right. Mr. Gupta. One commitment.
India will need to keep on building data centers for next 9 to 10 years. With all the digitalizations we are already having in our lives and the digitalization which is about to come thanks to AI and AI-driven tools. So growth has to be there. How do we make it sustainable? Number one, for data centers, we use 100% green power, which is absolutely doable technically and also from regulations point of view in India today. Second, we reduce the amount of cooling which data centers need because that is a very, very large component. Again, there are technology available which can reduce the amount of cooling. There are operating practices and standards which need to be adopted to reduce the amount of cooling in data centers. Third, the type of hardware we are using in data centers, a lot of things are being done by the hardware manufacturers to actually make them efficient, so that again the amount of power being consumed by the IT equipment also reduces. And fourth, something which we ignore, I think sir mentioned about water. Beyond power consumption, there are much more to data centers. Today in India, we are no more building small buildings, we are making campuses. So what type of waste treatment we are doing?
Right.
How we are doing rainwater harvesting? Can we use the rejected heat to plow it back for some useful purposes? These are the things which are gradually becoming more important. So yes, data centers, we are maniac about uptimes, but yes, increasingly this thought of energy efficiency and sustainability by these means is coming in.
All right. Sir, if I were to ask you, key priorities for the Namami Gange mission for the next 5 years, what is the next goal that you would be working towards?
Again, I'll go back to the water sector again because that's more closer to me. I will strongly advocate behavior change with 5R principles: the reduce, reuse, recycle, rejuvenate, and respect water, with the focus on circularity of economy. Then probably we'll be able to mix both growth as well as sustainability, because you're asking about growth and sustainability. Both can go hand in hand together if the circularity is brought in. Thank you.
Right. That's a very important point. Final thoughts, sir?
Yeah. So commitment from our side is that we will always be ahead of the curve in terms of the airport sector in sustainability. So our commitment for this year is that by the end of the year, we will be water positive, because we already have got enough of rainwater harvesting pits, and there are 300 more which are coming. So with that, we are going to be 108% of water. And by 2030, a net zero carbon airport.
Right. And Mr. Sharma, one commitment from you, very in a brief 10 to 15 seconds.
So I'll make two. First, we want to expand this Green Yodha initiative. We want all of us to come and pledge something for the bigger cause, because we believe this is going to be solvable when all the ecosystem awakes. From a personal corporate perspective, we have already committed to be a carbon neutral operations by 25. We are working on a plan with our top 1,000 suppliers to decarbonize them, 50% of their operations by 25. 60 of them are global suppliers in India. And of course, we have made a pledge to be carbon neutral company by 2040. So that's the pledge we have taken.
Right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this panel discussion. Lots to think about. And thank you very much, everyone in the audience. And please stay glued to your seats. There's lots more coming up over here at this event. And I'll hand it back to Swati.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Parikshit. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for a very special address on leveraging technology to achieve energy efficiency. Well, as energy consumption continues to rise, there is a pressing need for applying more efficient approaches to make smart decisions for optimizing processes and reducing costs. With the right technological tools, organizations can achieve better productivity and enhance their company's performance while also receiving impressive cost savings. And so, to elucidate further on how companies can leverage technology in their ESG strategy to boost overall energy efficiency, I now welcome on stage Vibha Dhawan, Director General, TERI. Let's welcome her with a huge round of applause.
Thank you and good evening to all of you. So much has been said about the need for going green and net zero and so on. So it's really difficult for me now. The script which I got with me, I thought everything was talked about. So I really have to speak without it and rather what I feel are coming from the heart. Well, it goes without saying that sustainability is the mantra if the human race wants to survive on this planet. With so many negatives during the COVID time, one thing it has taught us that perhaps the nature will do much better without the human race. When we were sitting at home, we could hear birds. The rivers they got clean on their own. There was no air pollution. And it was much better world. We have also seen how much do we require. In terms of clothing, in terms of eating, our lives became so simple, and I think we were doing much better except for the fear that we can catch COVID any day and, of course, losing many of our dear and near ones. Now, if we look back, how perhaps our parents and grandparents were living. It was simple life. Sustainability word was never used, but it was always practiced. What we are today talking about waste, that was never the case. We are wasting material today and then we are saying we need circular economy. We were practicing all the time. We were not wasting. It's in between that we started following the West and maybe it became more fashionable that if I can afford it, why shouldn't I get into the consumerism kind of attitude? It was, and really speaking, if someone was trying to recycle, perhaps we looked down on that person and we will say how miser he is. He can afford, but still he's living this kind of life. And the results are in front of us. Like when I come from TERI, and way back in 1997, some of you might be aware that TERI, when everyone was talking of 50 years of India's independence, TERI brought out a report in which was, I'm very proud to say, the entire study was through corporate sector. So they gave us data, they gave us money, and we compiled a report which was called Green India 2047. And what we talked about, that yes, development has to take place, but the way in which we are developing is not going to be sustainable. And we brought out scenarios that if business as usual, if we continue on the same path, what is going to be India in 2047? So clearly brought about it's not going to be sustainable. The other thing which I find today, and it was also listed especially for the buildings, that the moment we talk of greening, whether it is for the industry, whether it is for the buildings, at the back of our mind, without even listening to it, we always say it's going to be expensive. We really don't look into that. Of course, your capex is going to be higher, you're going to invest more, but there is a payback period. The other thing is that we work in silos. Today, the Ministry of MOEF, they work independent of Ministry of Health. We only look at that come November and the pollution level in Delhi goes up, we only listen to, or in the news also, it is only you talk about the air quality. You are not bringing to the notice of even the policymakers how many people are suffering from the respiratory diseases, even heart attacks. Many of you, because in my own family, both my daughter and daughter-in-law, their heart rate started fluctuating. And then when we went to the doctor, he said it's very common, and we were quite surprised that it only happens during few months. And when I went to the pulmonologist, he simply said it's very common, and it's because of the air pollution. Now, this is something we are not talking about, the health burden, because of the increased emissions. And that is how, even in terms of making investments, we are going wrong. We are talking about agriculture, burning of agriculture residue. Why has it happened? Again, largely because some of you will say it wasn't the case perhaps 15 years back. So what has happened? We are still following wheat, rice pattern of sowing crops. So what has gone wrong? And it's again a clear-cut case, because for rice, we use so much of water. You have to raise nursery in standing water. And of course, Punjab is not the right place. Haryana and Punjab are not the right place for growing rice, but we grow it. And largely because, and I'll just tell you the reasons. Let's not blame the poor farmer. He'll sell for which he will get the returns. And what will sell easily? And therefore, it is wheat and rice for which he is able to get the right price. Distorted water pricing. The agriculture has become a political and very sensitive subject, and I'll say that you also have to fight. On one end, you want food to be produced, and food which should be affordable to to everyone. So that's your responsibility, and with the result, electricity for agriculture purposes is either free or subsidized to a great extent. So therefore, it is not the actual price of water. And what is happening, water is free, because we always say, first of all, there are no geographical boundaries, and therefore, any amount of water can be extracted. It doesn't belong to Punjab, it doesn't belong to Haryana. Electricity, you are not charging for. And therefore, the water table in those areas are going down. We are very happy reading the figures, how much of rice is exported, but it is virtual export of water, which we are not sensitive today. And in the panel, when I was discussing about when the point of water was raised, and I always say, you can still create energy, but you can never create water. So it is far sensitive subject than even energy, because energy, you are looking at hydrogen, you are looking at renewables, and fossil fuel, even if it ends one day, we'll have other solutions. But I'm sure without water, we can't live even for a day. And clean water. Of course, time and again, government has made number of plans, but at the same time, as citizens, we have also failed. Many of you are staying in Haryana, and there is a government regulation that you have to have water harvesting and you have to put a pipe. And I remember when we were building our house over there, so the builder told us, we'll have to put 6 feet pipe. I said, what for? And he said, for water harvesting. And I said, 6 feet? So he said, koi nahi aake dekhta hai. Was wo government completion, at the stage of completion certificate, you will have to show, and that will be done. So therefore, somewhere we are not responsible. Haryana requires water harvesting, but then as stakeholders, we don't feel that we need to invest, so which is very essential. Let's look at the use of RO water. Do we really need it? And it's again something which all of us are neglecting. RO is removing all minerals, and thereafter we take mineral supplements. So you're removing it from water, you're wasting 80% of The water, only 20% is what will come to you, but you are not sensitive towards it. So somewhere I feel we are, first of all, perhaps not aware, and second is we are not sensitive. And when we are talking of green Yodha, Yodha is someone who is fighting for everything, and he or she keeps her eyes and ears open. Now, I'm sure half of you are feeling uncomfortable because it's too cold in this room. Do we require this kind of temperature? Isn't it? It's an energy guzzler. But none of us will even raise an eyebrow over it that shouldn't the temperature be in the range of 20 and not 18. And that happens even at our house. You look at the kids, they prefer to sleep with the blanket even in the month of June with their AC on at 18 degrees. You ask these kids, what is climate change? And they all know about it, fortunately. And it's largely because what was predicted by IPCC reports, the real impact of climate change is much uglier than that. So therefore, everyone today is aware of it. You ask them the other question, who is responsible, or is my generation responsible? Perhaps 95% of them will say, yes, it is your generation. Okay, our generation is responsible. Who in our generation? Industrialized countries. Is it right to blame the industrialized countries? Isn't it each one of us are enjoying the fruits of industrialization? And really speaking, they have done their best. Whatever technologies were available, they have used those technologies and they have come up with the solutions to provide to us. Now, in terms of solutions, I'll put it this way, and one of the slides had also shown that we do have technologies available to us. I'll beg to differ with you. And the reason for that is many folds. Now, first of all, when we talk of the technologies, they are available perhaps for the larger industries. What will we do with our small and medium enterprises, which constitute almost 60% of the production? And unless you bring them, you give them the clean technologies, you are going to miss the bus. India can never achieve its target of getting net zero. Very rightly, of course, our Prime Minister had made a number of commitments, which are great, because at least we are talking in terms of policies, that what we are talking today as voluntary perhaps will become mandatory in years to come. And there is a clear signal for industry also that they have to go green. Industries are trying their level best. I must compliment them. They are coming forward. They are advancing their own targets in terms of going net zero. But at the same time, let's also look at how much can they do without any grant or any money coming to them. Going green, I again repeat, it is perhaps not expensive if you calculate over 5 to 10 years period. But it is definitely expensive when we talk in terms of putting the infrastructure. Where is the capex going to come from? As countries, different countries have different interest rates. So someone setting up in United States perhaps will end up paying 2% interest rate. In India, we'll pay 8%. You go to Africa, you may end up paying 20% on the borrowing that you will bring. Where is the risk-free borrowing available? It's not available for many countries like India. The new technologies, they are risky. Let's look into, like technology, you talk about solar. What was the rate a few years back of putting solar panels and generating solar energy? So if you have invested in technologies, then are you sure you will be able to sell the energy at the rate you will be able to produce it? So it becomes dicey. Today we are talking lots about electric vehicles. Do we have adequate green energy? Because if you generate electricity from coal, perhaps it doesn't qualify to be called green. So there are so many things that we need to solve. So we need to have CapEx available, and that is where I say that developed part of the world also has certain responsibility in terms of one is not asking for money, but one is definitely asking that give soft loans if you want to survive on this planet. Let's not forget, no one can go to a different planet. We all have to live here only. So that's one message. The other is technology readiness. And over there, I would like to say that yes, we do have technologies, but perhaps not suitable for small and medium enterprises. And that's where let's look into co-development of the technologies. Perhaps those small and medium enterprises, they don't need that level of sophistication either, and therefore the cost of technology is also going to be lower than the technologies today. Let's move away from the era of IPR. Let companies save money and pay you as license fee rather than asking for tech transfer fee on day one. So that's another hurdle which I feel. And the most important one I always feel is the mindset. We all feel, what difference will it make if I change? We all have to realize each one of us gets impacted due to the emissions, climate change, and so on, and each one of us is contributing to it. And that's where I feel this mission life is extremely important, and the kind of dashboards they are coming forward with, because at the end of the day, you should know what have I saved. And each one of us should also realize that we are adding to carbon emissions. And of course, there is something called, there is also like on one side we say, don't consume so much, and on the other side, the growth engine of that is that you have to increase your productivity. So there is also a dilemma, but at the same time, let's talk about that whatever we consume should be produced as green as possible. I'll come to one last point, and I would like to talk about the green buildings, because what we are talking about, that India still has to develop 2/3 of its infrastructure. And as rightly mentioned in the panel also, we are very fortunate that we don't have to break and build, rather it is we have to construct new. So therefore, perhaps in years to come, and I think already we are, you see the development in NCR and all the airports in the country, they are great. They are much better in every aspect compared to an airport in Europe or United States. So therefore, we have perhaps an opportunity to show to the world that you can be green and you can still be very comfortable. I'd like to invite you, all of you, to one of the Terry buildings. It's called Retreat, which is on resource efficiency. And the rooms over there, it's a training complex, they are not air conditioned. And believe me, even in the month of June, you can sleep very comfortably. And when you'll get up in the morning, you'll feel as fresh as you have actually slept, and you're absolutely fresh. So those knowledge is available within the country. And many of you might be aware that Terry is very active. We are working on sustainable habitats. And that is where we are also, we have GREHA accreditation system. So we started with the building design. Depending on the design of the building, and you can reduce as much as 40 to 45% of your energy requirements. It's also to be integrated. It should be zero waste generation. There are technologies available, like we have one technology called TEDx, and within 5 hours, you can treat the water. And it is at least good for horticultural purposes. We are not advocating for agriculture because some of the wastewaters will also contain heavy metals and so on. But then rather than polluting the rivers, you give the solution that you can treat water at an affordable price. And the reason, again, I'll come back to faulty pricing of water, because even if your recycled water costs you 2 rupees, there are no buyers, because extraction cost is next to zero kind. So therefore, there is no value. People don't want to recycle water. But perhaps the new norms, when you talk about zero waste generation, that is where also because of the higher volumes and technology improvement, those rates will come down, and at the same time, you will have a sort of that you are recycling and using it there itself, water. So in green building, and again, the government regulations, they are in that direction. One is moving in that particular direction, whether you look at the energy efficiency bill, you look at the new forest conservation bill, and I always say there is no word as waste. It is wasted. What we are talking about today when we are talking about biomass, and technologies are available. We are talking about biofuels, and you can generate biofuel. Like every organism has some component of lipid, and that lipid part is the one which is fuel, which is the fat content. So you can actually get it from anywhere. You have marine water in plenty, seawater. If you can grow algae in it, first of all, you're fixing carbon dioxide. You're getting biomass. Part of that biomass, you use lipid. And remaining, there are so many products, including bioplastic. So if we all sit down together and look into what can be done, we can find solutions. And I'd like to give one last example, and that is, again, that there is awareness, and one is moving in that direction. Like there is one, Terry has established with Ministry of Ports and Shipping, National Center of Excellence on Green Ports and Shipping. And it's not what India is doing. You also have to look into what are going to be the regulations in other countries. The carbon tax, rightly mentioned, will we be competitive if we continue on this path? You really have to look into it, and therefore, it is not just the fuel, it's not just the efficiency of the engine, it is not how you have constructed the ship, it's everything, how even the wastewater is generated. When the ship reaches, do you ensure just time arrival? How much of energy saving is there? How do you unload that? How much time should it take? When the trucks come, how green they are? What are the problems? Because sometimes you cannot even use LEDs because of the air pollution in those areas and so on. So you really have to look in totality, and I'm sure one will find the answers. And the best part is there is awareness. We also have to realize that, yes, first of all, let's not give pat at our backs saying that in India per capita emission is very low. I can assure you, each one of us sitting in this room, our emissions are as high as that of an American. It is largely because the energy excess to many of our fellow citizens in this country is not there. As the economic development will take place, the first thing everyone starts spending on is energy. So whether it is buying a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, whatever they can afford, so that expenditure is going to go up. We can't move from coal at the moment, but really speaking, we need to make plans that we will go green as much as possible. And then it is something like energy efficiency, and we are inefficient, but of course it's a price-sensitive market. So while we are talking about that 5-star or rating by Bureau of Energy Efficiency, we cannot force people to shift to 5-star all the time. If they have brought something today, and if 5-star is expensive, they may think twice. But let's also look into examples from LED bulbs and so on, how government ensured that it becomes a success. And the last point I'd like to say is sensitization. And that is, again, where I say that students at all levels, they must be taught about sustainability. They must be taught about that We cannot afford the way we are living today. And at the back of our mind, we should always keep, you and I perhaps can tolerate if there is a flood or any loss, but for poor people, it is loss of a generation, because they'll again become much poorer, and one more generation perhaps will miss going to school. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Actually, I'd request you to kindly stay back on stage. I'd also like to invite Parikshit back on stage and all the speakers of the evening to please come on stage for a quick photo op. And Parikshit, could you also please present them with a token of appreciation? All the panelists, please, of the discussion on stage. Let's welcome them with a huge round of applause. Thank you, everyone. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap from all of us. We thank all the industry leaders who shared their valuable insights at this event and all our guests for joining us today. We request you all now to join us for dinner. Thank you.